Welcome, brave soul. I am the forgotten storyteller. Before we begin, tap that like button if you dare, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're listening from. And if you make it to the end of this video, I hope to see you in the next story. I hope you're ready, because I am. Let's begin. What would you do if the last place on Earth for fuel was the last place you'd ever be seen alive? Our story today begins on a long, desolate highway, a stretch of cracked blacktop that cuts through the barren heart of nowhere. It's the kind of road truckers whisper about on their CB radios. The kind of place maps never quite capture. A road that seems to go on forever, though no one remembers where it truly starts or ends. At mile marker 86, under a sky that seems a little too dark even at noon, there stands an old petrol station. A squat, decaying building with its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. The neon sign that once proudly glowed, "Fill up, 24 hours," now flickers weakly, its buzzing hum louder than the crickets. The pumps, rust-eaten and crusted with grime, still wheeze out fuel. But the locals, what few live in the nearby towns, know better. They say anyone who stops there never makes it past the next mile. Their cars are always found abandoned, engines still warm, sitting quietly in the ditch about a mile up the road. But the people are gone. Not a trace. No footprints in the dirt. No torn clothing. No signs of a struggle. Just gone. And when you pass the station at night, some claim to see figures, pale and wavering, standing in the dusty windows. Some claim to hear the soft hiss of a pump being pulled, even when the place is empty. And some swear they've seen the attendants, though no one has worked there in decades. But tonight, you and I will linger a little longer. Because our story follows a man named Eric Callahan, a traveler. A restless soul with too many miles on his tires and too few friends left to call. Eric didn't believe in small-town ghost stories. He believed in the road, the hum of an engine, and the quiet solitude of being between places. Until he found himself low on fuel. It was well past midnight. The sky overhead was thick with storm clouds that blotted out the stars. Rain had turned the desert into slick mud, and the wind lashed against Eric's car like 1,000 grasping fingers. His fuel light had been glowing for miles, mocking him with its orange urgency. He cursed under his breath, scanning the darkness for any sign of salvation. And then, like a beacon, the neon sign appeared. "Fill up, 24 hours." Eric sighed in relief, pulling into the cracked forecourt. The tires crunched over gravel and broken glass. The station loomed before him, a squat husk of what it once was. He noticed immediately how still everything was. Even the storm seemed quieter here, as though the building had swallowed the wind. Finally, damn near ran out. Thought I was screwed. He stepped out, the air heavy and cold, and approached the pump. It was old, the paint flaking, the numbers faint beneath a thick film of dust. He slid his card, but nothing happened. And yet, when he lifted the nozzle, a thick stream of fuel began to pour as though the machine had been waiting for him. Eric frowned. Gas stations didn't just work without power. But he was too tired, too desperate to think twice. He filled his tank, the click of the pump echoing unnaturally loud in the still night. That's when he heard it. A voice. It was soft and whispering. Right behind him. "Don't go." Eric spun, his heart jolting. But there was no one there. Only the flickering neon light, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. He shook his head, laughing nervously at himself, and shoved the nozzle back into place. But as he turned, his eyes caught the station's window. And he froze. Because staring back at him was a man. The figure was pale, his skin gray and mottled like something waterlogged. His eyes were sunken pits, and his mouth hung open in a silent scream. He stood pressed against the glass, unmoving, unblinking. Eric's chest tightened. He blinked once, and when his eyes opened again, the figure was gone. The window was empty. He muttered a curse, forcing himself back into the car. His hands shook as he gripped the wheel, and the engine roared to life. He pulled out of the station as fast as he could, gravel spitting from beneath his tires. But relief never came. Because 1 mile up the road, his car sputtered and the engine died. The dashboard lights flickered, the radio hissed static, and the engine fell silent. Eric cursed again, slamming the steering wheel. He tried the ignition, over and over, but the car was dead. And then, silence. Complete silence. No rain. No wind. No crickets. Nothing. The world was holding its breath. And Eric was not alone. In the rearview mirror, he saw movement. Shadows. Pale figures standing just beyond the glow of his headlights. Dozens of them. Their bodies stiff, their faces twisted in expressions of agony, their mouths opening and closing soundlessly. Eric's breath came shallow. His hand trembled toward the door handle, but before he could move, something tapped on the driver's side window. He turned his head. And there, inches from his face, was the same pale attendant from the petrol station window. The hollow-eyed man leaned close, his lips curling into something like a smile. And in a voice that was both a whisper and a scream, he spoke. "You shouldn't have stopped here." Eric's scream tore into the night, then cut short. The next morning, a trucker passing down Route 86 spotted an abandoned sedan in the ditch exactly 1 mile from the old petrol station. The engine was still warm. The doors unlocked. The driver's wallet, phone, and belongings untouched. But Eric Callahan was gone. He had vanished, just like all the others. And still the station waits. Still the neon flickers. Still the pumps breathe life into the empty tanks of desperate travelers. And still no one makes it past the next mile. Because the station isn't just haunted. It's hungry. And tonight, it's waiting for someone new. But you see, dear listener, Eric Callahan's story is not the first. Not by decades. Long before the road stretched this far into the desert, before GPS and satellite towers mapped every forgotten mile, there was only a dusty trail, winding between dead farmland and skeletal trees. And in 1953, the Johnson family built their pride and livelihood along that path, Johnson's Gas and Service. It was supposed to be salvation for travelers in the middle of nowhere. A bright, neon-lit beacon for weary motorists. Harold Johnson, his wife May, and their teenage boy, Frank, worked tirelessly to keep it running. And business was good. At least until the drought came. The drought starved the land. Crops withered. Livestock dropped dead where they stood. And with the drought came desperation. Rumors began to spread in town. That Harold was charging triple the price for fuel. That he was watering down gasoline. That he'd turned away travelers in need, leaving them stranded. And then one night, something happened. A man stumbled into the station, half crazed, raving about how Harold had refused him service earlier that day. He shouted that his family had died on the roadside, his wife and 2 children, trapped in a broken-down car under the blazing sun. The man begged Harold for help, for water, for anything. And Harold just laughed. Something in the man snapped. He pulled a knife, slashing wildly. The struggle was fast, brutal, and bloody. By the time it was over, Harold, May, and young Frank lay dead on the station floor, their blood seeping into the cracks of the linoleum. The man staggered back out into the night but never made it far. His body was found a mile down the road, torn apart by something no one could explain. And from that night on, Johnson's Gas and Service was never the same. The pumps still worked, though no one maintained them. The neon still glowed, though no one paid the bills. And the station, it fed. It began luring travelers. Isolated ones. Desperate ones. And each time, the same ritual. They filled their tanks. They drove exactly 1 mile. And then they vanished, leaving their cars behind like offerings. Some say it was Harold's spirit, refusing to let go of his business. Others claim the land itself was cursed, poisoned by the rage of the man who lost his family. But whatever it was, Johnson Station became more than haunted. It became a trap, a wound in the earth that swallowed the living whole. And the town nearby, they learned quickly to keep their distance. Farmers whispered warnings to their children. Preachers muttered sermons about the devil's pit. Truckers swapped stories at diners, shaking their heads. But nobody ever tried to tear the station down, because some things fight back. And yet, not everyone heeded the warnings. There was once a young journalist, Claire Watkins. She was 24, hungry for a story, desperate to make a name for herself. And when she heard the rumors about the petrol station, she knew she had found her big break. Armed with a tape recorder, a camera, and the foolishness of the young, she drove out to the desolate stretch of Route 86. This'll be easy. An abandoned building in the desert? I'll get some creepy photos, interview a few locals, and boom. Feature story. But Claire didn't just photograph the station. She went inside. The door was unlocked. The air smelled of rust and rot. The counters were still sticky with decades-old stains. Dust coated everything, except for the pumps, which gleamed as though freshly polished. She clicked on her recorder, her voice trembling with excitement. Inside the infamous Johnson's Gas and Service. Everything looks untouched. It's strange, like someone's been cleaning, even though no one lives here. The windows, I can't, oh God. Her voice faltered, because in the corner of the office she saw them. 3 shadows, just standing and watching. A man, a woman, and a boy. The Johnson family. Their eyes were milky white, their mouths slack and open, drooling darkness onto the floor. They moved in unison, shuffling closer, their limbs jerking like broken puppets. Claire screamed, bolting for the door, stumbling back into the night air. She fled to her car, throwing it into gear, tires spinning in panic. She drove 1 mile. Exactly 1 mile, before the engine coughed, choked, and died. The recorder was later found in her abandoned car. Her voice still etched in its final moments. They're here. Oh God, they're all here. Hundreds of them, faces in the dark. Hands scratching the glass, and oh, her body was never recovered. Her story, never written. Only the tape, discovered by state police, remains. But the tape was never released to the public. It sits, locked away in evidence. And sometimes, when new officers are brought on, their seniors will dare them to listen. Few make it all the way through. So you see, there is a pattern. A ritual carved into the bones of the land itself. The station offers salvation, lures the desperate, feeds the hungry pumps, and delivers its victims to the shadows waiting exactly 1 mile away. But here's where the story turns darker. Because some believe the petrol station doesn't just take lives. It actually keeps them. If you drive by at 3 a.m. and you're reckless enough to stop and listen, some claim to hear the faint hum of voices. Pleading, screaming, begging for release. The souls of the lost, trapped in an endless loop of their final moments. Their whispers bleed into the radio static, into the wind that rattles the signs, into the drip of fuel from the rusted pumps. Some even claim the shadows that gather on the roadside are not ghosts. They are shells. The hollow husks of what remains after the station consumes the soul. Bodies without meaning, faces without memory, and the station grows stronger with each one. But the true horror, dear listener, is not that the station kills. It's that it waits. It's patient. It knows the road is long and fuel runs dry. And when your tank is empty, where else will you go? So far, we've heard the tales, the whispers, the warnings. We've walked through the shadows of what the petrol station does to those who wander into its grasp. But you, my listener, must be wondering, why 1 mile? Why not 10 feet away? Why not within the forecourt itself? Why does every soul vanish exactly 1 mile from the pumps? The answer is buried in the earth. In 1971, a survey crew was sent to widen Route 86. They planned to cut deeper into the desert, expand the road to support the new trucking industry. But when the crew began to dig exactly 1 mile north of Johnson's Gas and Service, their equipment hit something. Not rock, not soil, but bones. Massive pits of human remains. Layer upon layer of skeletons, fused together as though the ground itself had swallowed them whole. The workers panicked, thinking they'd unearthed some forgotten graveyard. But the state sent investigators who claimed the bones were animal. The crew didn't believe them, because some of those skulls still had teeth, with fillings. And some of the bones were fresh. The next week, the project was abandoned. The equipment left to rust. The surveyors quit. And Route 86 was never widened. So now we know. Exactly 1 mile from the petrol station lies its mouth. A pit of endless hunger. A graveyard that never stops growing. A wound in the world that demands offerings. And the station? It's the lure. The anglerfish's light, drawing prey ever closer to the maw. But not all who vanish are truly gone. Some come back, or at least pieces of them do. There was a man named Daniel Price, a drifter. He was seen stumbling out of the desert 3 days after his car was found abandoned 1 mile from the station. His skin was pale, blistered, his lips cracked. The sheriff picked him up, asking how he'd survived. Daniel only whispered one thing. They won't let me leave. I told them I'd bring more. More for the pit. More fuel. And then he collapsed. They rushed him to the hospital. But when the doctors cut away his shirt, they saw something carved deep into his chest. A symbol. Circular, jagged, almost like the nozzle of a fuel pump. The doctors swore it pulsed as though alive. Daniel never woke. His body vanished from the morgue before morning. And ever since, people claimed to see him, standing at the pumps, waiting, whispering to travelers to fill up. So, perhaps the petrol station doesn't just lure the living. Perhaps it recruits. Perhaps the shadows you see at the glass aren't simply echoes, but attendants, trapped forever, guiding the station's endless hunger. And now, dear listener, let us return to you, because by now you're wondering why this story feels so close. Why it clings to your thoughts the way oil clings to skin. Maybe it's because you've been on that kind of road before. Alone. Late at night. Tank running low. Eyes burning from the monotony of the highway. Maybe you've seen a flickering sign in the distance, glowing red against the dark horizon. Maybe you've told yourself, Just one stop. Just enough to get me to the next town. And maybe, just maybe, you've been closer to Johnson's Gas and Service than you realized. After all, roads change names. Maps forget. And the desert stretches on forever. What if you already passed it once and didn't even notice? What if the next time you're low on fuel, the next lonely station you find isn't on your GPS? What if the pumps hum a little too loudly and the neon flickers in time with your heartbeat? Would you still pull in? Would you lift the nozzle? Would you fill your tank, even knowing the truth? Because the station is still out there. The pit is still hungry. And the shadows are waiting. And if you listen closely, if you dare, you can already hear them. So, next time you drive through the desert and your tank dips below empty, remember what happened to Eric Callahan, to Claire Watkins, to all the nameless souls swallowed whole. And remember this above all else. Once you fill your tank at Johnson's Gas and Service, you'll never make it past the next mile. And if, by chance, you're driving right now, look in your rearview mirror. Do you see the shadows yet? Let us know in the comments, would you pull into a petrol station that looked like it had not been used in years?
Ready for spine-chilling tales that will haunt your thoughts? Subscribe to Forgotten Storyteller for eerie narrations, unsettling mysteries, and haunting stories you won't forget. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, because some stories refuse to stay buried. Join us, if you dare.